The gunshot that killed Dalton Zimmerman echoed through the canyon on a scorching July afternoon in 1878, and Quinn Zacharias pulled the trigger, knowing he had just ended the life of the most dangerous outlaw in West Texas. 3 months later, Quinn found himself standing at the edge of a failing ranch outside Dallas, Texas, staring at fence posts that leaned like drunken men, and wondering why the hell he had agreed to help the widow of the man he had killed. The morning sun beat down mercilessly as he gripped the handle of his hammer, sweat already forming beneath his hat, while behind him, the woman responsible for his conflicted conscience stood on the porch of her weathered farmhouse, watching him with eyes that held more strength than sorrow. Delia Zimmerman had not cried when the sheriff delivered the news of her husband's death. She had stood in that same spot on the porch, her hands clasped in front of her plain brown dress, and simply nodded before turning back inside. The town had whispered about her coldness, her lack of grief, but Quinn knew better than most that some marriages were forged from necessity rather than love. He had tracked Dalton Zimmerman for 6 months across 3 territories, learning everything about the man who had robbed stagecoaches, burned homesteads, and left a trail of violence that demanded justice. What he had learned in those months was that Dalton had taken Delia as his wife not out of affection but out of possession, claiming her father's land when the old man died and treating her like just another piece of property. Quinn had not wanted to come here. When Sheriff Morrison suggested he check on the widow, Quinn had refused outright. The idea of facing the woman whose husband he had killed seemed like torture, even if Dalton Zimmerman had deserved every bit of justice that came to him. But Morrison had been insistent, explaining that Delia was struggling to maintain the ranch alone, that the fences were falling apart, that rustlers were eyeing her cattle, and that without help she would lose everything her father had built. Quinn had argued that surely someone else could assist her, but Morrison had given him a long look and said that most men in Dallas were too frightened of Dalton's former gang members to get involved, fearing retribution for helping his widow. So here Quinn stood, 28 years old with a reputation as one of the finest trackers and shots in Texas, feeling more uncertain than he had ever felt facing down armed outlaws. He set his jaw and walked toward the nearest section of broken fence, deciding that if he was going to do this, he might as well start immediately and avoid prolonged conversation. The wood was sun-bleached and cracked, split by years of harsh weather and neglect. Dalton clearly had not cared much for maintaining his wife's inheritance, too busy running with his gang to bother with honest work. Quinn pulled the first broken post from the ground, the dry earth releasing it with little resistance. He was measuring a new post when he heard footsteps behind him. Delia approached carrying a wooden bucket, her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, her face shaded by a simple bonnet. She was younger than he had expected, perhaps 25, with sharp features that might have been beautiful if they were not so carefully guarded. Her dress was faded but clean, mended in several places with careful stitches that spoke of pride despite poverty. "I brought water," she said, her voice steady and clear. "It is going to be a hot day." Quinn straightened and removed his hat, wiping his forehead with his sleeve. "Thank you, madam." She set the bucket down and met his eyes directly. Her gaze was a startling shade of green, bright against her sun-touched skin. "Mr. Zacharias, I want you to know that I am aware of who you are and what you did. Sheriff Morrison told me everything." Quinn felt his chest tighten. "Madam, I am thanking you," she interrupted quietly. "Dalton was not a good man, he was not a good husband, and he would have killed more people if you had not stopped him." The words hung in the air between them, honest and raw. Quinn had expected anger, resentment, perhaps even hatred. Instead, He found himself looking at a woman who seemed relieved, unburdened, as though a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. It made his own guilt feel strangely misplaced. "I am sorry for your loss all the same," Quinn said carefully. No matter what kind of man he was still your husband. Delia's expression hardened slightly. "He was my jailer, Mr. Zacharias. My father was a good man who built this ranch with his own hands, and when he died, Dalton married me before I could even process my grief. He wanted the land, not me. For 3 years I lived in fear, never knowing when his anger would turn violent, never knowing if his enemies would come seeking revenge and find me instead." Quinn absorbed this information, feeling the complexity of the situation settle around him like dust. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I do not want you working on my ranch out of guilt," she said firmly. "If you are here to ease your conscience, you can leave now. But if you are here because you are a decent man who would help a neighbor in need, then I welcome your assistance and will pay you fairly for your work." He almost smiled at her directness. There was steel in this woman, a backbone that had survived circumstances that would have broken lesser people. "I do not need payment, madam." "Then you do not need to be here," Delia replied. "I will not be anyone's charity case. If you work, you will be paid. I have some money saved that Dalton never found, and I can offer meals and a place to sleep in the barn. Those are my terms." Quinn considered her for a long moment, recognizing that this was about her pride as much as anything else. She had spent years powerless, and now she was claiming what control she could. He respected that. "Fair enough. I will work for meals and lodging, but I will not take your money. Save it for supplies you will need to get this place running properly." She opened her mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. Instead, she nodded once, crisp and businesslike. "Agreed. Breakfast is at dawn, lunch at noon, supper at sunset. Do not expect anything fancy." "I do not need fancy, madam. I just need it to be edible." The corner of her mouth twitched, not quite a smile but close. "I think I can manage that, Mr. Zacharias." "Quinn," he said. "If I am going to be working here, you might as well call me Quinn." "Delia," she replied after a moment's hesitation. "And I suppose if we are going to be practical about this, we should be on a first-name basis." With that settled, she turned and walked back toward the house, leaving Quinn with the water bucket and his thoughts. He watched her go, noting the straight set of her shoulders, the determined stride despite the worn boots. She was a survivor, and something about that called to him in a way he had not expected. He pushed the feeling aside and returned to his work, driving posts into the hard ground with methodical precision. The first week passed in a rhythm of physical labor and careful distance. Quinn worked from dawn until the light faded, repairing fence lines that stretched across acres of land. The property was larger than it had looked initially, with good grazing land that had been underutilized and water sources that needed clearing. Delia's father had chosen well when he settled here, and Quinn could see the potential beneath the neglect. He found himself planning improvements beyond just the fences, thinking about how the ranch could thrive with proper attention. Delia kept her word about the meals. She was a competent cook who made simple but satisfying food. Cornbread and beans, stews made from preserved vegetables, occasionally chicken from the few birds she kept. They ate in silence mostly, both seemingly unsure how to bridge the gap between them. Quinn slept in the barn, which was weathered but solid, and found it more comfortable than many places he had stayed during his years of tracking outlaws. At night, he could hear coyotes in the distance and the restless movement of Delia's small herd of cattle in the near pasture. On the 8th day, Quinn was working on the eastern fence line when he spotted riders approaching. 3 men on horseback, moving with the casual confidence of people who did not expect resistance. He recognized trouble immediately and set down his tools, checking the revolver at his hip. The riders stopped about 20 yards away, and Quinn studied them carefully. The one in the middle was broad-shouldered with a scar running down his left cheek. The other two were younger, probably in their early 20s, with the eager meanness of men trying to prove something. "You are on private property," Quinn called out, his voice level. The scarred man grinned, showing yellowed teeth. "We know whose property this is. We are here to see Mr. Zimmerman's widow. Got some business to discuss. Mrs. Zimmerman is not interested in visitors." "You can state your business to me." The man's grin faded. "And who the hell are you? Someone who is telling you to leave." One of the younger men laughed harshly. "You hear that, Cole? He is telling us to leave. That is real funny." Cole, the scarred man, studied Quinn more carefully now. "I know you. You are the tracker, the one who killed Dalton." Quinn said nothing, but his hand moved slightly closer to his gun. "That is real interesting," Cole continued. "Dalton's widow hiring the man who made her one. That seems cold, even for a woman like her." "I will not ask again," Quinn said quietly. "Leave." "We rode with Dalton," Cole said, his voice hardening. "And we figure his widow owes us something for our trouble. Dalton had money hidden away and we aim to find it. Now you can step aside and let us talk to the lady, or we can go through you." "Your choice." Quinn did not move. He had faced situations like this before, knew the math of violence. 3 against 1, but they were spread out and he had the advantage of preparation. "There is no money here. Whatever Dalton had, he spent. And even if there was, you would not get it. Now ride out before this gets ugly." The younger men reached for their guns, but Quinn was faster. His revolver cleared leather in a smooth motion, aimed steady at Cole's chest. "Do not," he said simply. Cole raised his hand slowly, his face darkening with anger. "This is not over." "Yes, it is. You come back here and I will not just draw on you, I will finish it. Dalton paid for his crimes. Do not make me add you to that list." The tension stretched thin as wire, and for a moment Quinn thought it would snap into violence. Then Cole jerked his reins and turned his horse. "Let us go, boys. This is not worth dying over today." They rode off, but Quinn watched until they disappeared from sight. His heart was pounding, adrenaline singing through his veins. He holstered his gun and turned to find Delia standing near the fence, her face pale but composed. She had a rifle in her hands, and he realized she must have come out when she saw the riders. "Who were they?" she asked. "Men from Dalton's gang. Looking for money they think he hid." "There is no money," Delia said firmly. "Whatever Dalton stole, he gambled away or spent on whiskey. He left me nothing but debts and this failing ranch." Quinn walked toward her, checking to make sure the riders had truly gone. "They might come back." "Then we will deal with it when they do," she said, and he heard the slight tremor beneath her brave words. "Thank you for running them off. You should not have come out here. If shooting started, this is my land," Delia interrupted, her green eyes flashing. "I will not cower in my own house while men try to take what little I have left." Quinn saw something in her then that struck him deep in his chest. It was not just courage, but a fierce determination to stand her ground no matter the cost. She had been beaten down by circumstance and a brutal husband, but she had not been broken. There was fire in her, banked but not extinguished. "Fair enough," he said quietly. "But next time, let me handle it first. If it goes wrong, I need you able to ride for help, not caught in the crossfire." She considered this, then nodded reluctantly. "That is reasonable, but I will not hide, Quinn. I have hidden enough." The way she said his name sent an unexpected warmth through him. They walked back toward the house together, and Quinn found himself acutely aware of her presence beside him, the way the sunlight caught in her dark hair, the determined set of her jaw. He pushed the thoughts aside, reminding himself that he was here to help, nothing more. She was his enemy's widow, and any feelings beyond basic respect were inappropriate. But as the days continued to pass, Quinn found it increasingly difficult to maintain that distance. Delia began to talk more during meals, sharing stories about her father and the early days of the ranch. She told him about growing up in Dallas when it was barely more than a trading post, about learning to ride before she could properly walk, about her mother who had died when she was young. Quinn listened and found himself sharing his own stories in return, about growing up in Oklahoma Territory, about learning tracking from a Kiowa friend of his father, about the choices that led him to become a lawman's tracker. They discovered unexpected common ground. Both had lost parents young. Both valued honesty and hard work. Both had been shaped by the harsh realities of frontier life, but had not let it make them cruel. Their conversations grew longer, more comfortable, punctuated by laughter that surprised them both. Quinn caught himself looking forward to mealtimes, to the sound of Delia's voice, to the rare smiles that transformed her careful features into something luminous. 2 weeks after the confrontation with Cole and his men, Quinn finished repairing the last major section of fence. The work had taken longer than expected, partly because he kept finding other tasks that needed attention. A rotting porch step, a loose board in the barn, a well pump that needed new leather washers. He told himself he was just being thorough, but the truth was he did not want to finish because finishing meant leaving, and leaving meant not seeing Delia every day. That evening, Delia made a special supper to celebrate the completed fences. She had traded some eggs in town for a small roast, and she served it with potatoes and carrots, even producing a bottle of wine that had belonged to her father. They ate on the porch as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The September air had finally started to cool, bringing relief after the brutal summer heat. "The ranch looks different now," Delia said, gazing out at the repaired fence lines. "It looks like it did when my father was alive, like a real home again." "Your father would be proud of you," Quinn said. "You have kept fighting for this place even when it would have been easier to give up." She turned to look at him, her eyes reflecting the sunset. "I could not have done it without your help, Quinn. I know I said I did not want charity, but I am grateful you came. You have given me a chance to make something of this place." "You would have found a way," he said, meaning it. "You are too stubborn to fail." Delia laughed, a genuine sound that made Quinn's heart lift. "Is that a compliment or an insult? Out here, stubborn is the highest compliment there is." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping the wine and watching darkness creep across the land. Quinn felt a contentment he had not experienced in years, a sense of rightness that had nothing to do with completing a job and everything to do with the woman sitting beside him. "What will you do now?" Delia asked quietly. Now that the work is finished, Quinn had been dreading this question because he did not have a good answer. "I suppose I will head back to town, see if the sheriff has any work that needs doing." "I see." Her voice was carefully neutral, but Quinn heard the disappointment beneath it. "Unless," he continued, the words coming before he could think better of them, "you need help with other things, building up the herd maybe, clearing that northern pasture. Could be a winter's worth of work if you wanted." Delia turned to face him fully, searching his face. "Is that really why you want to stay? For the work?" The question hung between them, loaded with meaning. Quinn knew he should deflect, should maintain the safe distance they had been carefully preserving. Instead, he found himself telling the truth. "No, I want to stay because I have come to care about what happens to you and this ranch. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being the widow of my enemy and became someone I respect. Someone I enjoy being around. Someone I think about when I should be thinking about fence posts. Color rose in Delia's cheeks, visible even in the fading light. Quinn, I do not know if that is wise. People in town already talk. If you stay, they will talk more. Let them talk. I have never cared much for gossip. It is more complicated than that. She stood and walked to the porch, railing, her back to him. I am only recently widowed. Even if I did not love Dalton, even if I am relieved he is gone, there are proprieties. And beyond that, you were the one who killed him. How could anything between us ever be right? Quinn stood and moved to stand beside her, close enough to feel her warmth but not touching. I killed a dangerous outlaw who was hurting people. You were married to a man who treated you like property. Those are the facts. What we do with them now, that is our choice. We can let the past trap us, or we can decide that maybe something good can come from all that pain. Delia's hands gripped the railing tightly. I am afraid, Quinn. I am afraid of making another mistake. I am afraid of trusting my judgment when it failed me so completely with Dalton. You did not choose Dalton, not really. He took advantage of your grief and your situation. But I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow, Delia. I am just asking if I can stay and keep helping with the ranch. Whatever else might develop, we can let that happen naturally. No pressure. No expectations. She turned to look at him, and in the darkness, her eyes were luminous. You are a good man, Quinn Zacharias. Better than I expected when you first showed up here. And yes, I would like you to stay. I would like that very much. Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of possibility. Quinn reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. Her fingers were work-roughened and strong, and they curled around his with a rightness that made his breath catch. They stood there together as the stars emerged overhead, not speaking, just being present in the moment. The next morning, Quinn rode into Dallas to purchase supplies for the ranch. The town had grown considerably since its founding, now boasting several streets of businesses, a proper church, and even a small schoolhouse. He stopped at the general store and was placing his order when Sheriff Morrison walked in. Quinn, good to see you in town. How is the work going out at the Zimmerman place? Fences are done. I am staying on to help with some other projects. Morrison raised his eyebrows. Is that so? Well, I suppose the widow could use the help. She seems like a decent woman from what little I have seen of her. She is, Quinn said firmly, and she is working hard to make an honest go of that ranch. The sheriff nodded approvingly. Good. We need more honest folk out here. Too many troublemakers still running around after that business with Dalton's gang. He lowered his voice. Speaking of which, I heard Cole Masterson and some of his boys were seen near the Zimmerman ranch a couple weeks back. Any truth to that? They showed up looking for money they thought Dalton had hidden. I sent them on their way. Morrison's expression turned serious. Did they give you trouble? Nothing I could not handle, but I have been keeping an eye out in case they come back. You let me know if they do. Cole is mean, but he is not stupid enough to cause problems if he knows the law is watching. I will send a deputy out that way now and then, just to check on things. Appreciated, Sheriff. Quinn finished his business in town and loaded the supplies onto his horse. As he was preparing to leave, he noticed a woman watching him from across the street. She was middle-aged and well-dressed, with the pinched expression of someone who enjoyed other people's misfortunes. When she saw him notice her, she turned and hurried away, but Quinn had the distinct feeling he would be the subject of gossip before sundown. He did not care. Let them talk. He had spent too many years alone, drifting from job to job, never putting down roots. Maybe it was time to see if he could build something permanent, if he could be more than just a tracker and a gun for hire. The thought both excited and terrified him. When he returned to the ranch, he found Delia in the vegetable garden behind the house, pulling weeds. She had removed her bonnet, and her dark hair was coming loose from its bun, curling slightly in the humidity. She looked up at his approach and smiled, a genuine, open expression that made something in his chest tighten. "Did you get everything we needed?" she called. "And then some. I figured if we are going to expand the herd, we will need more feed for winter." She stood, brushing dirt from her hands. "You are planning that far ahead now." Quinn dismounted and began unloading supplies. "Seemed like the smart thing to do, unless you would rather I did not." Delia walked over and placed her hand on his arm, stopping him. "Quinn, I want you to understand something. I am glad you are staying, more glad than I know how to say properly, but I need you to be sure this is what you want. If you are staying out of obligation or guilt, that will poison everything eventually." He set down the bag he was holding and turned to face her fully. "I am staying because when I think about leaving, about going back to tracking outlaws and sleeping in different towns every night, it feels wrong. Like I would be walking away from something important. I cannot promise I will be good at staying in one place. I have never done it as an adult, but I want to try, with you, if you will have me." Delia's eyes searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt or deception. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she stepped closer and, after a moment's hesitation, rested her forehead against his chest. Quinn wrapped his arms around her carefully, as though she were something precious and fragile, though he knew she was anything but fragile. They stood that way for a long moment, and Quinn felt pieces of himself settling into place, pieces he had not realized were scattered. The weeks that followed fell into a new pattern. Quinn and Delia worked the ranch together, sharing the labor and the decisions. He taught her things his Kiowa friend had taught him about reading weather signs and tracking animals. She taught him about the specific challenges of ranching in Texas, about the local markets and which merchants were fair dealers. They talked endlessly, learning each other's thoughts and dreams and fears. The physical attraction between them grew steadily, an undercurrent to everything they did. Quinn caught himself watching the way Delia moved, the grace in her capable hands, the curve of her neck when she bent over a task. He saw her watching him too, her gaze lingering on his shoulders when he worked shirtless in the heat, her eyes following the line of his jaw. But they moved slowly, both cautious, both learning to trust. It was mid-October when Quinn finally kissed her. They had spent the day in Dallas selling some of Delia's preserves and using the money to buy 3 young heifers to add to the herd. The purchases represented hope, a concrete investment in the ranch's future. On the ride home, Delia was more animated than Quinn had ever seen her, talking excitedly about her plans to eventually build the herd to 30 head, maybe 40 if the grazing held up. "We could actually make a real living from this place," she said, her eyes bright. "Not just surviving, but thriving. I never thought that would be possible after Dalton, but now I can see it. We could build something good here, Quinn. We." She said it so naturally, including him in her vision of the future without hesitation. When they reached the ranch, Quinn helped her down from the wagon, his hands on her waist. Instead of stepping back immediately, he held on, drawing her closer. Delia's breath caught, but she did not pull away. "Can I kiss you?" Quinn asked quietly, needing her permission, needing to know she wanted this too. "Yes," Delia whispered, and then his lips were on hers, gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. She tasted like the peppermint stick she had bought in town, sweet and fresh. Her hands came up to his chest, then around his neck, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," Quinn admitted. "I have wanted you to," Delia replied, her cheeks flushed. "But Quinn, we need to be careful. I cannot afford scandal. If people think badly of me, it could hurt the ranch's reputation, make it harder to do business. Then we will be discreet. I will continue sleeping in the barn. In public, we will be business partners. But here, when it is just us, can we be honest about what this is?" "And what is this?" Delia asked, though her smile suggested she knew. "It is me falling in love with the strongest, most remarkable woman I have ever met. It is me wanting to build a future with you if you will have me." Delia's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears. "I did not think I could feel this way again. I did not think I could trust anyone enough to let them in. But you have been so patient, so kind. You see me, Quinn, not just what I can provide or what I look like, but who I actually am. And yes, I think I am falling in love with you too." They kissed again, longer this time, letting themselves feel the full weight of their emotions. When they finally went inside for supper, something fundamental had changed. They moved around each other with new awareness, hands brushing more often, smiles more intimate. It was as though permission had been granted to acknowledge what had been building between them all along. But their happiness was interrupted 3 days later when Cole Masterson returned, this time with 6 men instead of 3. Quinn was working on repairs to the barn roof when he spotted the riders approaching. His stomach sank as he counted them, recognizing immediately that this was not a situation he could handle alone. He climbed down quickly and ran to the house. "Delia, get your rifle and stay inside. Do not come out unless I call for you." She appeared in the doorway, taking in his urgency. "What is wrong?" "Cole is back with more men. I am going to try to talk them down, but if shooting starts, you need to be ready to defend the house." Fear flashed across her face, but she nodded and disappeared inside. Quinn heard her barring the door and checking the windows. He walked out to meet the riders, his hand resting on his gun but not drawing it. Not yet. Cole sat on his horse with a satisfied expression. "Told you this was not over, Tracker. You cost me and my boys a good thing when you killed Dalton. We have been thinking about that, thinking about what we are owed." "You are owed nothing," Quinn said flatly. "Dalton made his choices and he paid for them. That has nothing to do with his widow." "See, that is where you are wrong." Cole leaned forward in his saddle. "Dalton told me before he died, told me where he stashed his take from the last 3 robberies. Said it was hidden on this ranch, buried somewhere only he knew. That money belongs to us now, and we are going to tear this place apart until we find it." "There is no money," Quinn insisted. "Dalton spent everything he stole. His widow was left with nothing but debts." "Then you will not mind if we look around, will you?" Cole gestured to his men. "Boys, start with the barn. Check every floorboard, every stall, then we will move to the house." "You are not touching anything on this property," Quinn said, his voice hard. "You need to leave, now." Cole's expression turned ugly. "You are outnumbered, Tracker, 6-1. I do not care how fast you are with that gun. You cannot take all of us." "Maybe not. But I will take you first, Cole. That is a promise. So you need to ask yourself if that money, if it even exists, is worth dying for." The standoff stretched taut, and Quinn knew it was about to break when Cole's hand moved toward his gun. But before anyone could draw, the sharp crack of a rifle shot split the air. Everyone froze. The bullet had struck the ground directly between Cole's horse's front hooves, making the animal rear and nearly throw its rider. Quinn glanced back and saw Delia standing on the porch, her rifle aimed steady at the group. "The next shot goes through someone, not the ground," she called out, her voice carrying clearly. "I am a very good shot, and from here I cannot miss. You are trespassing on my land, threatening my property and my life. The law gives me every right to defend myself." "You heard the lady," Quinn added. "And before you get any ideas about rushing us, you should know that Sheriff Morrison is aware of your previous visit. He has a deputy checking on this ranch regularly. You start something here, you will have the law on you faster than you can ride out." Cole's face had gone red with fury, but Quinn saw calculation there too. The man was weighing his options, trying to determine if the risk was worth the reward. Finally, he jerked his reins viciously. "This is not finished. Dalton hid that money somewhere, and I am going to find it. If there is money, the law can help you search for it properly," Quinn said. "But you will not do it by threatening and terrorizing a woman on her own land." Cole spat on the ground and turned his horse. His men followed, but they kept looking back, and Quinn knew that Delia's shot had been the only thing preventing violence. When they were finally out of sight, he turned to find Delia lowering her rifle, her hands shaking now that the danger had passed. He crossed to her quickly and took the rifle, setting it aside before pulling her into his arms. She was trembling, adrenaline and fear catching up with her. "That was incredibly brave and incredibly foolish," he said against her hair. "I could not let them hurt you, and I meant what I said. This is my land. I will not let anyone take it from me, I know. But Cole was right about one thing. I cannot protect this place alone against that many men if they decide to come back in force." Delia pulled back to look at him. "What do? We go to the sheriff. We make this official. And then we figure out if there is any truth to what Cole said about Dalton hiding money on the property." They rode into Dallas the next morning and found Sheriff Morrison in his office. Quinn laid out the situation, and the sheriff's expression grew increasingly grim as he listened. "Cole Masterson has been trouble for years," Morrison said when Quinn finished. "I have never been able to pin anything specific on him, but I know he rode with Dalton's gang on occasion. If he is claiming Dalton hid money on the ranch, it is possible he is telling the truth. Dalton was paranoid about banks and other outlaws. He might have buried his take somewhere he thought it was safe. Even if that is true, it does not give Cole the right to terrorize Delia," Quinn said. "Agreed. I will send deputies out to the ranch, have them patrol the area regularly. That should keep Cole from trying anything too bold." Morrison looked at Delia. "Mrs. Zimmerman, have you noticed anything unusual on your property? Any areas that look like they might have been disturbed or dug up?" Delia shook her head. "No, but I have not exactly been looking. The ranch is over 300 acres. Dalton could have buried something anywhere. If that money exists and if Cole finds it, does he have any legal claim to it?" Quinn asked. Morrison considered this. "Legally, anything Dalton owned became his widow's property when he died. If money is found on the ranch, it belongs to Mrs. Zimmerman, but proving where that money came from might be complicated. If we can tie it to specific robberies, it would need to be returned to the victims." "I do not want stolen money," Delia said firmly. "If anything is found on my property, I will cooperate fully with returning it to its rightful owners." Morrison nodded approvingly. "You are a good woman, Mrs. Zimmerman. I wish more folks had your integrity." He stood and retrieved a piece of paper from his desk. "I am going to write up a formal complaint about Cole's harassment. If he comes back, you have legal documentation of his threats, and I will talk to some of the local ranchers, see if any of them might be willing to ride out and help keep an eye on your place." They left the sheriff's office feeling somewhat reassured but still uneasy. As they walked to their wagon, they passed the church, and Delia paused, looking at the simple wooden building. "We should think about getting married," she said quietly. "Not just because it is proper, but because if something happens to one of us, the other should have legal rights to the ranch." Quinn felt his heart jump. "Is that a proposal, Mrs. Zimmerman?" She turned to him with a slight smile. "I suppose it is, though I am probably doing it all wrong. But these are practical concerns, Quinn. Beyond whatever feelings we have for each other, marriage would protect us both legally." "You are right about that," Quinn agreed. "But I want you to know that when I marry you, and I very much want to marry you, it will not be just for practical reasons. It will be because I love you and want to spend my life with you." Delia's eyes softened. "I want that too, but there is still the matter of propriety. Dalton has only been dead 4 months. People will talk." "Let them," Quinn said again. "But if you want to wait, I will wait. I am not going anywhere." They discussed it on the ride home and ultimately decided to wait until after the first of the year, giving Delia a full 6 months of widowhood. It was not the full year that strict propriety demanded, but it was a compromise between their desires and social expectations. In the meantime, Quinn moved his things from the barn to the small guest room in the house, reasoning that if Cole and his men came back, he needed to be close enough to protect Delia immediately. The weeks leading up to Christmas were tense but peaceful. The sheriff kept his word about patrols, and Cole Masterson seemed to have backed off. Quinn and Delia continued working the ranch, preparing for winter, building their herd slowly. They also spent long evenings by the fire, talking and reading to each other, learning to simply be together in domestic comfort. Quinn found himself happier than he had ever been. Waking up each morning with purpose, seeing Delia's face across the breakfast table, working side by side with her throughout the day, it all felt right in a way nothing else in his life ever had. He had been a wanderer for so long that he had forgotten what it meant to belong somewhere, to have someone who mattered more than the next job or the next town. Delia bloomed under the security and affection he provided. The careful guardedness that had marked her when they first met gradually fell away, revealing a woman with a quick wit, a generous heart, and dreams she had been afraid to voice. She talked about eventually adding chickens for eggs to sell in town, about planting a larger garden next spring, about maybe hiring a hand to help with the heavier work so they could expand faster. Quinn loved hearing her plans, loved seeing her think beyond mere survival to actual prosperity. Christmas Eve found them sitting together on the porch despite the cold, wrapped in blankets and watching snow fall gently across the ranch. It was the first snow of the season, transforming the familiar landscape into something magical and new. "My father used to say that snow on Christmas was a blessing," Delia said softly. "A promise of renewal and fresh starts." Quinn pulled her closer against his side. "Seems fitting then. This year has been full of fresh starts for both of us." "You ever regret it?" Delia asked. "Staying here, giving up your freedom to wander, not even once. Do you ever regret letting me stay?" "Never." She turned her face up to his, snowflakes catching in her hair. "I love you, Quinn Zacharias. I did not think I would ever say those words to anyone again, but they are true. You have given me back my life, my hope, my ability to dream." "You did that yourself," Quinn said, kissing her forehead. "I just helped with the fences." She laughed and swatted his arm playfully. "Is that what we are calling it now?" They went inside and Quinn gave her his Christmas gift, a new saddle he had commissioned from the leatherworker in Dallas. It was beautiful, tooled with a pattern of flowers and vines, practical but elegant. Delia ran her fingers over the leather with reverence. "Quinn, this must have cost a fortune. You needed a decent saddle. Yours was falling apart." He did not mention that he had spent most of his saved wages on it, that he had wanted to give her something special, something that acknowledged the new life she was building. Delia's gift to him was a heavy winter coat she had sewn herself, lined with wool, and built to withstand the harsh Texas winters. When Quinn put it on, he saw that she had embroidered his initials inside the collar, a small personal touch that made it clear this was made specifically for him with love. "It is perfect," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you." They spent Christmas Day quietly, just the two of them, and it was the best Christmas Quinn could remember. No fancy food or elaborate celebrations, just good company and the peace of being exactly where they wanted to be. The new year of 1879 arrived with cold winds and the promise of change. True to their word, Quinn and Delia were married in a simple ceremony at the Dallas church on January 15th. Only a handful of people attended: Sheriff Morrison, the minister and his wife, and a few neighboring ranchers who had become friendly with Delia. It was not a grand affair, but it was genuine, and when Quinn slipped a simple gold band onto Delia's finger, he felt the weight of commitment and promise more profoundly than any words could express. That night, in the privacy of their room, Quinn made love to his wife with tenderness and passion, grateful beyond measure that she had trusted him with her heart and her body. Delia responded with an eagerness that surprised them both, and afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, they talked about all the things they wanted to build together. "I want children," Delia admitted. "Is that foolish? I am 25 already. But I always imagined having a family, and with Dalton I knew that was impossible. I could not bring a child into that situation." "It is not foolish," Quinn assured her. "I want children too. I want to fill this house with life and laughter. I want our sons and daughters to grow up knowing they are loved and safe." "Our sons and daughters," Delia repeated, smiling in the darkness. "I like the sound of that." Spring came early that year, bringing new life to the ranch. Delia discovered she was pregnant in March, and Quinn's joy was so profound he could barely contain it. He became even more protective, insisting she avoid heavy work, though Delia laughed at his worry and continued most of her normal tasks. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, Quinn. I am not made of glass. I know that. But you are carrying something precious, our child. Let me worry about you." She softened at that and kissed him gently. "All right, I will let you worry. But I am not spending the next 6 months sitting idle." They compromised, with Quinn taking on the heavier work while Delia focused on the garden and the household tasks. The ranch continued to prosper. Their herd had grown to 20 head, and they had established a good reputation in Dallas for fair dealing and quality livestock. Money was still tight, but they were no longer just surviving. They were actually building something sustainable. In April, Cole Masterson made one final appearance. He rode up alone this time, looking worn and defeated. Quinn met him with his gun drawn, but Cole raised his hands immediately. "I am not here for trouble," Cole said. "I am leaving Texas, heading out to California to try my luck there, but I wanted you to know I am done looking for Dalton's money. I spent months searching, even hired a man with experience in these things. We found nothing. Either Dalton spent it all like his widow said, or he hid it so well it will never be found." Quinn studied him carefully, looking for any sign of deception. "Why are you telling me this?" Cole shrugged. "Because I am tired. Tired of running, tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of chasing ghosts. Dalton is dead. That money, if it exists, is probably lost forever. Time to move on." He looked past Quinn toward the house. "Tell Mrs. Zimmerman, tell Mrs. Zacharias, that I am sorry for the trouble I caused. She was right. She deserves to live her life in peace." With that, Cole turned his horse and rode away, and Quinn never saw him again. He told Delia about the conversation that evening, and she seemed relieved but not surprised. "Maybe we will find money someday, buried in some forgotten corner of the property," she said. "Or maybe Dalton spent every cent he stole on cards and whiskey. Either way, we do not need his money. We have built this on our own, and that makes it mean something." Quinn could not have agreed more. The summer was hot but productive. They hired a young man named Thomas to help with the ranch work, giving Quinn more time to spend with Delia as her pregnancy advanced. She grew round and radiant, her earlier wariness completely gone, replaced by contentment and anticipation. Quinn found himself constantly amazed that this was his life now, that he had found this kind of happiness almost by accident. Their daughter was born on a warm September evening, arriving quickly and with minimal fuss. Delia labored through the afternoon with the help of a midwife from town, and just as the sun was setting, Quinn heard the sharp cry of his newborn child. He was allowed in moments later and found Delia exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft cotton. "Meet your daughter," Delia said, her voice tired but happy. "She is perfect, Quinn. Absolutely perfect." Quinn approached on shaking legs and looked down at the impossibly small face peeking from the blankets. His daughter had a dusting of dark hair, and her eyes, when they briefly opened, were a deep blue-gray. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "What should we name her?" he asked, unable to look away from this miracle they had created. "I was thinking Rose," Delia said, "after my mother, Rosalina Zacharias." "Rose," Quinn repeated, testing the name. "It is perfect. She is perfect. You are perfect." He bent and kissed his wife gently, overcome with love and gratitude. A year ago, he had been alone, drifting, living only for the next job. Now he had a wife he adored, a daughter who represented all his hopes for the future, and a home that was truly his. It seemed impossible that so much could change so quickly, but frontier life was like that. Harsh and unforgiving one moment, generous and beautiful the next. The years that followed were not without challenges. There were droughts that tested the herd and their resources. There were harsh winters that required every bit of their ingenuity to survive. There were moments of doubt and fear, times when the ranch seemed like it might fail despite their best efforts. But Quinn and Delia faced everything together, their partnership strengthened by shared struggle and shared success. Rose grew into a bright, energetic child with her mother's determination and her father's sense of adventure. She learned to walk between the fence, posts her father had repaired, learned to ride almost before she could run. When she was 3, Delia gave birth to twin boys, and the house that had once been so silent and oppressive under Dalton's rule filled with noise and chaos and joy. Quinn taught his children the skills his Kiowa friend had taught him, passing on knowledge of the land and respect for nature. Delia taught them letters and numbers from the few books she owned, determined they would have education even on the frontier. Together, they built not just a ranch but a legacy, something their children could be proud of and build upon in turn. One evening in the autumn of 1884, Quinn stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching his children play in the yard while Delia prepared supper inside. Rose was 8 now, helping her mother more and more. The twins, Daniel and David, were rambunctious 5-year-olds who kept everyone on their toes. The ranch had 50 head of cattle now, and they had built a second barn to accommodate the growth. They had hired 2 permanent hands and were considering a third. By any measure, they had succeeded beyond what either of them had imagined that day Quinn first arrived to mend broken fences. Delia came out to join him, wiping her hands on her apron. She leaned against him comfortably, the gesture familiar after years of marriage. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How strange life is," Quinn said. "How one decision, one moment can change everything. If I had not agreed to check on you that day, if I had let someone else take the job, neither of us would have this. But you did come, and we did build this, together." She looked up at him with eyes that still made his heart skip. "Do you ever think about him, about Dalton?" Quinn considered the question honestly. "Sometimes. Mostly I think about how he wasted the gift he had. He had this land, he had you, and he threw it all away for violence and greed. It makes me grateful." Every single day, I wake up grateful that I get to be here, that I get to love you and raise our children, and watch the sun set over land we have earned with our own hands." "That is a good way to think about it," Delia said. She was quiet for a moment, then added, "I used to hate him. For trapping me, for making me afraid, for stealing years of my life. But now I mostly feel nothing. He is gone, and what we have built here has nothing to do with him. This is ours, Quinn, every bit of it." "Ours," Quinn agreed, pulling her closer. "And our children someday, a real legacy." Rose called out from the yard, wanting her father to settle some dispute between her brothers. Quinn laughed and went to mediate, Delia following behind. They spent the evening as they spent most evenings, together as a family, building memories that would last long after they were gone. As the years continued to pass, Quinn and Delia watched their children grow and the ranch flourish. Rose eventually married a schoolteacher who came to Dallas and brought her husband to work on the ranch with her father. Daniel showed an aptitude for ranching that matched Quinn's own, while David proved to have a gift for trade, and often accompanied his mother to town to handle business dealings. In 1889, when Quinn was 39 and Delia was 35, they added one final child to their family, a daughter they named Margaret after Delia's grandmother. By then, the ranch was well established, prosperous enough to provide for all of them comfortably. The children Quinn had once dreamed about filled the house with life, and the fences he had mended a decade earlier still stood strong, a testament to the foundation they had built. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Quinn took Delia back to the spot where he had driven the first fence post, where he had stood uncertain and conflicted about helping his enemy's widow. The fence line stretched away in both directions now, enclosing thriving pastures full of cattle. The ranch house had been expanded and improved, painted and maintained with care. Everything about the place spoke of permanence and pride. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Delia asked, standing beside the fence post. "You said you were here because a decent man helps his neighbor in need." "I remember. I was trying to convince myself that I was not making a terrible mistake." "Were you making a mistake?" Quinn turned to his wife, the woman who had transformed his entire life, and smiled. "It was the best decision I ever made. Coming here, staying, loving you, all of it. I would not change a single moment." Delia reached up and pulled him down for a kiss, and Quinn thought about how far they had both traveled from those early days of careful distance and mutual wariness. They had built something real and lasting, not just in the land and the ranch, but in each other. Love forged from unlikely circumstances, strengthened by shared hardship, and celebrated in the daily choice to keep building together. The sun set over the Texas horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds, and Quinn Zacharias held his wife close, surrounded by everything they had created. The widow of his worst enemy had become his greatest love, and the broken fences he had mended had led him to a life beyond anything he could have imagined. It was not the ending he had expected when he rode onto this property a decade earlier, but it was perfect all the same. As darkness fell and the stars emerged overhead, Quinn and Delia walked hand in hand back toward the house, where light spilled from the windows and their children's laughter could be heard. They had built more than a ranch here in the Texas frontier. They had built a home, a family, and a love story that would endure long after they were gone, passed down through generations as proof that sometimes the most unlikely beginnings lead to the most extraordinary endings. Inside the house, Rose was putting Margaret to bed while the twins argued good-naturedly about something inconsequential. The familiar sounds of domestic life wrapped around Quinn like a warm blanket. He caught Delia's eye across the room, and the look they exchanged held everything they had been through together. all the challenges overcome and joys celebrated. In that moment, Quinn felt the profound peace of a man who had found exactly where he belonged, who had taken his greatest regret and transformed it into his greatest blessing. The cowboy who had killed the outlaw had healed the widow's heart, and in doing so, had healed his own.